You got it.
Brian Chapman.
Sandra Steele. Not working?
Is it on the bottom? Yeah.
I'll do it for you. We have Ken Kilgore, we have Brianna Brush, Troy Cunningham.
Okay, I've asked Councilman McComber to give us our invocation, and then we have a scout from Troop 1163, Travis Pope, who will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance.
Our dear and gracious Heavenly Father, as we come before Thee at this time, we're truly grateful for the many blessings that Thou hast given us. We're grateful for the opportunity to live here in the city of Saratoga Springs and being able to call this home. Heavenly Father, as we meet this day, we ask that Thou will bless us, that we'll be able to have the ability to understand the ramifications of the conversations and the decisions that we'll be discussing, not only for today, but for the many years to come, as this project will bring thousands of residents to Saratoga Springs, and we want them to have a good experience and have the ongoing positive experience as they live here in Saratoga Springs, and all those who already live here as well. Heavenly Father, we love Thee and we appreciate all things, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, so tonight we have one agenda item. So we're, oh, flag, sorry, I'm jumping.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now we're where I should have been. Oakwood Homes, Glenn is the applicant for Riverside Drive and Pioneer Crossing. I appreciate this opportunity to have both the council and the planning commission together so we can be on the same page as we go into a project this size to represent the residents. I ask that both the planning commission and the council, as we're having this discussion, and Oakwood is looking for input and feedback to kind of remember what we had gathered from the residents through the surveys of what they hope and envision Saratoga Springs to look like, so that we can represent them and the vision of Saratoga Springs as we get into this. So invite the applicant up to the hot seats, and you got...
Yeah, I'll just do a brief, I'll give more time to the applicant, but yes. So tonight, Oakwood Homes is here to discuss with the Planning Commission and City Council their proposal for what's being referred to as Jordan Promenade, 400 South Riverside Drive. Oh, wrong mouse. There we go. Area you see in blue, this is the location of the proposal. To orient yourself, 400 South, Redwood Road, Saratoga Drive. Patriot Park, you see right here, this area here will actually come out of the blue. That's where the new city complex, the city center will be located. So the rest of this now then is the property that we'll be discussing tonight for the Jordan Promenade. Jordan Promenade is located in the city center district area plan. As we all know, that came in, I believe it was in 2010, the church annexed the property, came in under that district area plan. They do have the planned community zone in place right now. Now in that district area plan, there are, what you see on the right of the screen, this is one of the 6 concept plans that are within the district area plan. I've just shown you one. And again, the area circled in white, that is the property that we're looking at tonight. So in that district area plan, there are several place types which could be placed throughout the DAP. The area you see here then is identified by 6 of those place types, is used within those 6 different concept plans. They do vary a little bit. Most of the variation takes place just right down here on the south. In fact, there is no variation in the 6 district area plans on the north side of the project. But so in the district area plan, this area is identified as the traditional neighborhood, the town neighborhood, regional retail, business park, transit-oriented development, and neighborhood commercial. And again, each of those are represented by a color. Again, various locations throughout that specific district area, or throughout the Jordan Promenade area are identified by those, the colors. And so that gives the option for the developer. It goes into more detail in the district area plan, what those neighborhoods would entail for as far as density goes, as far as types of open spaces and parks. I've not included that tonight. That could be a time for a different discussion. But pretty much overall, this is what the applicant is looking at tonight. So there's a total of 467 acres in the project. 30 of those go to the regional sports, the expansion of the park, and some of these numbers are to be tweaked a little bit according to the city manager. Open space in the residential area would encompass about approximately 76 acres. So in the whole project in its entirety, we'll have about 151 acres of open space. So that's then broken down into the various different development areas. Again, you see the city center complex of the 25 plus acres. We got commercial areas. We have future elementary school site. We have future meeting house locations, residential areas. So of the 467 acres, 316 would then be proposed to be developed. The applicant has 4 product types which they would like to construct in the development, and they have those broken down by name: the Westridge Townhomes, the Carriage houses, Park House, and then Overlook. There are some multifamily as well then. So all in all, you're looking at 4.1 to 7.4 dwelling units an acre, depending on how you look at whether it be gross or net. This is actually I'll stop here. The applicant brought by about half an hour ago a revised concept plan here and some, so it's a little bit different than what you have in your packet, as well as the elevation drawings, the pictures you have as well. So I do have their presentation here, so I will bring up theirs at this time. And then I'll actually then turn it over to the applicant here, and they can pick up from here and go through their concept plan at this time.
Thanks, David. Mr. Mayor, members of the Council and Commission, thank you for the time. My name is Sam Colgan. I represent Oakwood Homes here in Utah. We really do appreciate the opportunity to come and visit with you folks tonight. This is just a concept plan. We are engaged with Josh Rowland here with me as well, LAI. They are the master planner that we are using on this project. We have been engaged with SLR on this property since about May or June of this year. So we've been working on this 470 plus or minus acres with various levels of planning and land plan adjustments. What you do see in front of you on the concept plan is the entire property that was controlled by SLR, from Redwood Road over to the river, from Pioneer Crossing down to the south to 400. We do understand and appreciate that the city, since we've begun the negotiations and the discussions on planning this property, the city has engaged in several different transactions with SLR in terms of finishing the expansion of the park area by adding additional property to that, as well as the municipal complex. So that was property that was initially part of what our planning effort is. That's why you still see it on here. When we come forward in community plans and village plans, those pieces will be excluded. All the calculations will be adjusted to be specifically the property that we will be entitling. We will not be entitling the property that the city's engaged with. So I do want to make sure that is understood, that this was our opportunity to look at the entire property. When we master plan a community, we do look at all the adjacent uses, all the municipal uses, all the open spaces. We think it's important to have that concept brought all the way through. So with that, we've got a really brief slide presentation to kind of walk us through our planning efforts and what we're proposing. Jordan Promenade is the name that we're currently putting on the community. We think it is important to recognize the proximity to the Jordan River and how important that is to both the community we're putting in, as well as as important it is to Saratoga Springs. A little bit about Oakwood Homes. Oakwood Homes was founded 25 years ago by Pat Hamill in Colorado. And Pat's vision for the company was then and remains today to be a master plan developer. That is the bulk of the business for the company. And we are excited to have this be our second large significant master plan in Utah. So we're very excited to bring that forward. We think there's a lot of opportunity to bring the company's values that we hold so dearly to us, which is how to make an integrated community plan to be involved not just with the residential but the entire body of the property, to look at the integrated uses from schools and education to the meeting houses, to the proximity to adjacent uses, transportation, infrastructure. All of that is part of what we're looking for. This is just a brief picture of Oakwood. Our mission is to help families build their dreams. So we are not just about building houses. We are truly interested in the community and the family values that come with it. So part of that is really building creating the sense of place. We think that it is important that that is at the cornerstone of how we develop the master plan, how we lay it out. We look at all the linkages and connectivity so that it is a place where people truly can live, work, and play. So with that, we can change the slide. Building great communities in a sense of place. Again, just reiterating, that's what Oakwood is interested in this project as well as all the others. And I'm not going to read this to you. You guys have all had a chance to read this. Most of this slide deck is very similar to what you've seen before, as is the master plan. There's just some very minor adjustments. But education is one of the cornerstones of what we believe is important. We have met with the Alpine School District. We have cited a school facility based off of their desires, their direction. And so that's where we wound up with that facility being placed into the master plan. Housing diversity is another key element, especially when we're talking about a community with this type of acreage involved with it. It is not a master plan that endorses having one single building type or product type. We think that a mix of housing product and diversity is important, as there's a mix of people who are interested in housing, from the townhome product up to the larger product. We think that we have to span that and really respond to the demand that the marketplace brings us together. I did mention education as being a cornerstone for what we do, and David, you can click one. Thank you. So much so that Pat, when he founded the company, started the Build Strong Foundation. It is an education foundation that over the course of the 20 years has made over $4 million in donations. It is all about giving back to the school and to the community in terms of making sure that educational component is part of every community that we plan to put together. It is certainly part of this. We have been engaged with the Alpine School District. We intend to continue that engagement and move forward with those. There's a couple of things you see in here in terms of how the Build Strong Foundation does contribute through grants, design and construction, so hard costs as well are part of it, scholarships, the book trust, where they've given over 500 books to the educational system. Another piece is the Colorado Home Building Academy. That's a new venture for the company. The Colorado Home Building Academy was started just this last year, in the last 12 months. It is based in our PBS Precision Building Systems yard. It's part of where we are recognizing the need to bring a skilled labor force into the construction industry. So we are training people who want to apply to the academy in all aspects of the construction trade, electrical, siding, framing, plumbing, mechanical, HVAC. All of that is part of the training curriculum that they can go through to come out of this program with a vocation that they can carry forward in life. So that's a little bit about the company. Like I said, we are very excited to be here. We are excited about the project and the opportunity. I think that the planning that's been done to date on the larger piece of the SLR property presents a lot of opportunities. We've met with several of you folks in terms of trying to begin to share the vision of this community, and we want to continue to do that. We did have the opportunity a week or so ago to take some of the staff on a product tour. I think it was really important and purposeful to demonstrate how the product really lives and fits in the communities. It's not just about the lots and the lot sizes, it's about how the product fits, how it integrates, how it lives together. And I would love the opportunity to take any and all of you out on a similar product tour. All the product that we're showing in here is product we do build in Utah and product we would bring into the community. Part of our product design process, we do have in-house architecture, an architectural group that designs all of our product for us in-house. Gives us the opportunity to respond to consumer feedback and demand. We then use that same platform that they designed to take it out to our panel plants. We are a vertically integrated builder. We have a panel plant here in Tooele that builds all of our floor joists, wall panels, roof trusses. Everything is manufactured in an engineered environment so that all of the wood products are manufactured in-house, then shipped to the job site and stood up in the field. It builds efficiency and quality into the product, It's just a cornerstone of Pat's vision for the company, and one that we continue to bring forward here in Utah as well, is that quality construction. So we can talk about product. We'd love to tour you guys, but I think that part of this is getting into the land plan. So I will let Josh lead us through the land plan and carry on through the deck.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Good evening, everybody. We certainly do appreciate the opportunity to give you a vision that that Oakwood has for this community and for Saratoga Springs. I can say that having had Oakwood as a client for over 12 years now, I've worked through multiple master plan community projects with them, and Sam does speak the truth that the true sense of place and the whole master plan community package has always been a very high priority for Oakwood Homes. They are not just a home builder; they truly are a community builder. And they do that through a couple of key efforts. The first being the diversity of housing product, and you'll see as we get into the master plan that each individual phase of the project has a variety of housing product type offerings, and that builds a very strong community network of different buyers, different buyer profiles. The first time home buyers, the move ups, the transitional home buyers that are moving down, and it really does create a neat sense of place with a broad spectrum of buyer types and people in the community. They do it through diverse recreational offerings. I could show you slide after slide of some really great park and open space features that we've had the pleasure of designing and helping Oakwood create to make their community special. Neat rec centers, neat the swimming pools, open space parks. So that recreational component, they understand is a huge draw from a marketing standpoint, and it's a huge, need in the community. It's what residents expect to have when they walk out their doors and be able to enjoy without having to leave their community. Sam spoke to the school and education component. It's always been a huge component of master plan communities that Oakwood builds. They know that people want their kids to go to school in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods. So we strive to have those be as a part of that community network. And we're also excited with this particular community to have the opportunity to have a lot of civic components integrated as well. The city's municipal complex, the regional parks, quite a few church sites, and the elementary school sites as well. So with that, I just want to start kind of high level, and as Sam mentioned, we are still high level with this plan. We've been working through a variety of land use ideas and concepts over the last 6 months, but we're still at the concept level, and that's why we're here tonight to get feedback from you all. We're certainly looking forward to hearing specific comments and desires and ideas that you have for this new development in your community. That said, a quick overview of proximity. I think most of you folks have a good understanding of where the project is. We are bordered on the north by Pioneer Crossing, a small portion of the project, a big western edge along Redwood, 400 south. On the south edge of our project, the Jordan River and Saratoga Road along the east edge of the project, and a future Pony Express corridor that's going to bisect the project east-west, and Riverside that runs north and south, that being the existing right-of-way that's been dedicated already. I always like to start at this kind of bubble plan level to give folks kind of an overview of what we're proposing here. We've got our residential areas identified in yellow. We have some of our commercial and mixed-use areas identified in red. The church sites have that light tan color. We have the elementary school site in our kind of northwest quadrant. And as Sam had mentioned, we have had meetings with the school district. This site is placed where the school site would like to see it, both from a kind of a location and a timing standpoint. They understand that, further south where the project will likely start is too early for the site, so they'd like to see it in some later phases. So we've had quite a bit of communication with them, and everyone's pretty happy with where we're currently locating the school. I also wanted to point out that we've made some tweaks and changes to some roadway corridors, specifically Pony Express, to make sure we can keep the existing Riverside corridor intact, both the roundabouts and their current locations. As we get into the master plan, you'll see that those roundabouts are part of our master plan. We want to keep the existing improvements intact and viable in their current condition. And what you'll see in these yellow residential areas is that within each phase, and we've kind of roughly called our southwest area phase 1 as you move north along Redwood phase 2, and then kind of jumping across Riverside, our phase 3 and 4 areas. But within each pod, you'll see we have that diverse mix of housing product that we'll get into more detail about here in the future. And as Sam had mentioned, when we started this project, we were looking at all the acreage, understanding that the first 30 plus or minus acres of the regional park had already been dedicated, but it's still part of this community, certainly. And then as the master planning process and discussions with the city staff and folks that help manage this great community evolved, we started to look at other properties for the city as well, the park expansion and the future municipal complex. So just quick overview, our park and open space, including the regional complexes, is around 150 acres. That also includes our residential park and open space. And you can see we've got what we're calling village parks within each major phase of our community, so that each smaller neighborhood area has a central park amenity. But we've very intentionally located some quality open space along our east and west boundaries, understanding that obviously one of our greatest amenities to this project is the Jordan River corridor. We have over 30 acres of land we're planning to dedicate along the Jordan River for an open space park. We'll get into that a little more here on the next slide. And you'll see in our the next slide as well. And Dave, why don't you go ahead and click to that. I know we're dealing on some screens that are a little removed from some of our older eyes, mine included here, but we very intentionally put some significant buffers along Redwood and along Pony Express, so that we're transitioning appropriately into the community, providing some great opportunities for regional trail corridors. A big priority with Oakwood's communities are trails and open space, and making sure that folks can get to and from parks and to and from schools and commercial on dedicated trail tracks. So as you study this plan and see there's a lot of different connections from the community out to the perimeter trails, into the community, to the parks, through the community, from west to east over to the Jordan River corridor. So we'll continue to expand on this open space network and kind of drill down on those details, but we're really excited about the Jordan River frontage for a lot of reasons. Let me switch my notes here. The river promenade, which is part of how we began to name this community, we see that as just one of the kind of the crowning jewels of this development. We're providing setbacks that are kind of well beyond the minimums that you guys identify in some of your open space code and criteria. We're providing parking lot and trailhead access for the greater community as well. We plan to have river access for folks to get in and experience and play, in that river environment, if it's stand-up paddle boarding or kayaking or tubing on the river. We're certainly looking to create ample opportunity for both these residents as well as residents of the overall city to be able to come and experience that. So that's roughly 31.5 acres along the Jordan River Promenade. Our village parks, which are our neighborhood parks within each phase, we have about 13 acres. Those are more structured parks and amenities. We're looking at least 1 or 2 clubhouse and pool facilities throughout the community. You'll see playgrounds, picnic shelters. Another neat open space component is our hot springs corridor, which separates the regional park tracks that the city owns and will own in the future from our phases there in the south. So looking to create a neat open space park amenity there. Those parks are roughly 13.5 acres. And then the rest of our private open space, if you will, it's just not specifically dedicated to the city, is comprised of other community trails and open space, those landscape tracks, trail corridors and buffers rounding out another 30 plus or minus acres of land. Next slide, please, Dave. So getting in, it provided a few character images of, how we see these parks kind of living and breathing. We're showing river access for boating and paddle boarding, trail corridors along the river, more structured park and open space with sports fields, playground amenities, and pool complexes as well. Next slide, please. So let's get into a little bit of detail on the master plan and kind of dial in a few of the acreage calculations. So that's anything that isn't commercial, schools, churches, and city tracts, and otherwise already dedicated right-of-way comprise about 240 acres of the project. So as Sam mentioned, when we come in for our community plan, which will first outline the Oakwood Homes developed areas, we have roughly 240 acres of residential. And then when you add that to our 76 acres of private open space that exclude the city tracts, you can take that acreage, and there's a lot of numbers here, so I'm just trying to kind of boil it down for you. And then I want to tie it back to the district area plan as well, because that's where some of the guidelines that we've been studying are derived from. But we're in that 22 to 23% open space, and as
18.7%.
excuse me.
18.7%.
Well, as I did the math,
You're getting open space credit from the church. You get full 25 acres, and you've got 25.
if you take our residential area of 240 and add the open space, 316 acres.
Open space on here.
Commercial and get to 366 total acres. Is that your math there? And then divide out the 20 or the 76 acre. Okay.
We can at a lower level elsewhere.
Well, I want to get my calculator here in a little bit and just double check some of that. But if you look at the traditional neighborhood category in the district area plan, they call for a density range of 5 to 32 units to the acre. That's the category that best fits what we're proposing here. It has single family detached on kind of medium and large, medium, and small lots. It has attached product and it has apartments. And so those are the three categories that we have in the master plan. So they have a density range of 5 to 32. I think we're in that probably 7 to 8 units to the acre, depending if you want to take a net or a gross density. And the recommended open space for that category is 18 to 24%. So if we need to do a little bit of work on our open space, we can certainly do that. We're yeah, we fit it. And I think Sam's point of mentioning that this project began as the whole picture, right? It's the whole 467 acres, and we have certainly been open and cooperated with the city on looking at providing more acreage for municipal complex and regional park. And so we think it's a reasonable angle to look at, this is part of our community. That regional park certainly is part of our community as well. And not only are we getting the benefit, but the city at large is. So if we're on the low end with the net, but well above on the gross, I think it's worth looking at it from both angles. But I appreciate the perspective. We're certainly cognizant of the open space, and we want to provide good quality. Moving on, just into some of the residential product. If you look in each of the phases that I had described, you can see a variety of colors listed there. And so what you'll find throughout this project are a couple of townhomes, and those are, in this particular plan, they're 4 and 5 and 6. Sometimes they're between 4 and 8. It just depends on how the very specific collection, which is I think probably new to the city here, is well suited for the move down buyer. Little to no yard maintenance and it's that low maintenance lifestyle that product really addresses well. We have our park house It's a 40 and 50-foot wide lot for the smaller characteristics described in the traditional neighborhood. We have the Overlook Collection, which is a larger lot, single family. We have an apartment area in the very north of the project we've referred to as mixed use. Certainly you can see commercial in that area, as well as I think is probably opportunity for the project. We're getting a lot of our direction from SLR on we feel like where those sites are. Right now, your primary corridors for traffic are along Redwood and along Pioneer Crossing. So if we're looking for viable commercial sites in the kind of the near and midterm, that's where you're going to get commercial developers interested in putting some in this area. So certainly Pioneer Crossing we see as a little more tucked around that meeting house site to the north along the river. That's a good viable apartment. Again, we have 70 developer kind of private open space, and then rounded out including the regional parks. Our commercial and mixed uses, and then the institutional uses round out the other 50 acres. So, northwest areas where the 11-acre elementary school site is located. And you can see again here in the kind of the bright orange or yellow where the 4 meeting house sites are located. With that, I've got a few slides that give you some visuals and some additional details about the product. So this is the Westridge Townhome collection that is currently being offered in other areas around the Salt Lake City metropolitan area. As I mentioned, 4 to 8 units, 4 to 8 units in cluster, 4 to 8 units in individual buildings. These have an alley access, so they live really well on the streets. We typically front these 2 public streets or to park spaces because they've got great front porches and the front doors are there without, being without having the garage on that elevation. The way we currently have these planned are they all have 2-car garages and they all have 2 cars of driveway parking outside of the garage. And that's primarily because these are accessed from an alley. They're not accessed from a public street, so there's no on-street parking where the driveway typically is. So we make sure that each of these units has a garage plus a driveway outside of the garage. And these range 2 and 3-story plans, 1,300 to 1,700 square feet. The next product is the Carriage house, and this is the one I mentioned is fairly unique to what you have seen in Saratoga Springs so far. These are 4 and 6 unit clusters that are accessed off a common driveway. These garages share a private drive, and there's a lot of advantages to these, both the lifestyle component that I mentioned as well. And David, if you would go to the next slide, you can start to see how a typical 4-pack lays out. I want to go over a few, I think, some of the benefits to this product. These live really well on the public street. You don't see any garages, from your views on the public street. You have in Saratoga Springs, you have detached sidewalks with a generous tree lawn. You have front porches that front to the street. It's pretty typical that Oakwood will do a paver driveway to really have an attractive transition back into the drive court. What it does is it takes where you'd have 4 driveway cuts and 4 garage, tuck all that back and away, and making for additional on-street parking for as well as a real attractive street scene. A 6-pack where there's 6 units going back instead of just 4. David, if you go to the next slide, you can see a few of the character photos of how these products live. This is a roomy product here. You have, I think, between about 1,700 and 2,400 square feet in these, 2 and 3-story. And again, it's attractive architecture. It's attractive presence on the street. And it's really it's a lifestyle choice with this product. Folks that don't want a big yard to maintain, don't want a driveway to shovel. They have a house here that has an HOA or common area maintenance on front yard landscaping and driveway maintenance. So this, as Sam and I had mentioned earlier, Oakwood's about providing product options for a diverse array of buyer profiles, because there's a lot of different buyers out there these days. Next slide gets into the single family detached. This is the Park House collection. These are 40-foot and 50-foot wide lots. And they also range into the 60-foot wide. There's 2- and 3-car garage options. There's ranches. There are 2-story options. This is your, move up and second move up buyer housing options here. I think there's 14 house plans with this product type. As I mentioned, multiple garage options. So this is, a lot of the bread and butter of Oakwood as well. But as you see when you study our development summary, we don't have, a high percentage of this. We've got a really balanced mix of the townhomes, the carriage house, the park house, and then if you'll go to the next slide, you can see some of the character photos of some of those elevation styles and some of the interiors. Oakwood does a great job with the interiors and the spaces. I've met a lot of their buyers over the years, and these houses live really well. The next slide gets into the next range up. It's the single family detached range. This is the Overlook Collection, and these are the larger lots, the 50s and 60s. Again, obviously they've got 2- and 3-car garage options, and they're in the larger floor plan ranges as well, in that 4,500 up to 6,000 plus square feet. These are for large families. Got a lot of neat options with finished basements and other covered porches and add-ons as well. That generally rounds out the presentation we wanted to make tonight. Again, our main purpose for being here tonight is to listen, as well as provide you with what we've been doing in the planning stages over the last 6 months. So thank you. We're certainly here to take questions and take notes, and we look forward to working with you and your staff in the very near future. Thank you.
Okay, we have a big group for comments tonight. So to kind of keep things civil, if you have questions during somebody else's time, please be patient so we can get to those. If not, please hold your comments or discussion for your turn. Commissioner Wilkins and I put together a kind of a list. If you like where you're at, it was my job. If you don't, it was Kirk's fault. So we'll go with, we're going to alternate back and forth. Councilwoman Barch, Commissioner Kilgore, Councilman McComber, Commissioner Brush, Councilman Porter, Commissioner Chapman, Councilman Podeska, Commissioner Still, Councilman Wilden, Commissioner Cunningham, Commissioner Wilkins, and then myself. So we'll go in that order. So we'll start with Councilwoman Barch.
Can you remind us, because I'm not going to remember by the time she's done?
Okay. By the time Shelley's done?
Yeah, I'm just teasing you.
Jim,
We'll give you a heads up, so you kind of know where you're at.
Mayor, did you forget to limit comments to 3 minutes and don't repeat anything that anyone else has said?
Yeah, I can go auctioneer on you if you want me to.
Shelley's
so.
3 hours, 3 minutes.
Okay. No, so first off, just for those who are out there in the public that don't necessarily, haven't been necessarily in on all of these discussions, I want to give a little bit of history. Just really quickly, there was a major expenditure done by the city in Riverside Drive, roughly, $4.5 million, something like that. And the reason we did that originally, just so that everybody's aware, is because we were absolutely jump-starting our business park area. This area was meant to be part of our business park. It was meant to flow from the Boyer and from the retail area down through the business park, down through those major corridors of, yes, Pioneer Crossing, now Pony Express, that is going to be a major, major corridor, and that's going to have all of our transit on it, and then, of course, Redwood Road. So that being said,
one of the things that we want to look at is the return on investment for all of our money. And this isn't just monetary return on investment, but also the emphasis on the river and the lake and the sports complex and the continuity with the crossing. From the majority of us, from the majority of our point of view, unfortunately, SLR chose to ignore a lot of this in our personal opinion and to look for straight housing product. That being said, as we look at this concept plan, I need to evaluate this concept plan. I appreciate Oakwood Homes in that they are a good business and that they have quality product. They have done some things that we have asked to help improve it and to make it work better and to focus a little bit on the river. I think that there are a lot of things that are still missing. So that being said, that's kind of where I'm going to go through. I have some serious concerns with, so I appreciate you working with Alpine School District and with the churches as far as getting church sites ready. We are a highly Mormonized culture, and we do need a lot of churches in this area. If one of them wants to be a Catholic cathedral, that's fantastic too. We would support that as well. I doubt that that would happen, but you know, we'll go for it. So that being said, if you look at the west and the southwest church, those function really well. If you look at the neighborhood, you've got great access. People can walk to the church as part of the neighborhood. It's incorporated. They also happen to be across from park areas where you can have a little bit of crossover between activities and parking and things like that. If you look at the very north church and the southeast church, particularly the southeast church, because the north is a little bit fluid with all of the apartments and the commercial, and who knows what's actually going to go up there. The southeast church, I think personally, is probably about in the worst spot you could have put it for a couple of different reasons. It's completely isolated from the neighborhood. It doesn't have any access from the neighborhood. You can't walk to that church. And while not everybody does, we are encouraged to walk to church to keep the cars out of the area. And we want this area to be as walkable and as pedestrian-friendly as possible. So I think it's kind of a mistake. Ideally, if you're going to do this kind of a plan, I would take that church and move it up next to that other village park, across the street from that other village park. Again, you get that continuity of uses there, and it's incorporated into the neighborhood. As I want to talk a little bit about your cottage lots, the, what do you call them? Carriage house. So one of the things, and again, you don't have the history on this, and some of our planning commissioners don't have the history on this, and actually some of our staff members don't. We looked at some zero lot line products, and we've looked at those before, and this, for those who didn't happen to notice, is a zero lot line product, if I'm not mistaken.
It is not zero lot line.
So you're telling me those are not red fences? Can you go, Dave? I could be completely mistaken. Can you go to the...
So technically, they are not a zero lot line product, but they have a cross-access easement.
No. Does the neighbor, can the neighbor in their own yard touch the neighbor's house?
Yes, they can.
It's a zero lot line product. Okay, so just,
Okay,
I don't
yes,
care what you call it. I
agree with
realize that
you.
you've got an easement.
I agree that in concept, it certainly is
Okay,
a zero lot line
perfect,
product.
thank you. So one of the things that we try really hard when we're doing as we're planning our future areas is we try really, really hard to make sure that we don't cause any potential problems between neighbors, that we avoid them as much as possible. You can't have perfect neighborhoods, it's not going to happen. But one of the things that we have decided many, many years ago, and I realize that technically within the DAP it was allowed, but we have not allowed it. We have not allowed zero lot line products. So you need to rework that to where you're not going to be touching your neighbor's house. The fact that I would have to go in my neighbor's backyard to paint my house, et cetera, is not something that we want to see. So, like I said, some of you in our staff members aren't aware of that history because they weren't here when we were having those discussions. So, for me, that's just a no. It's just not going to happen. I am technically one of 5 voting members and the other recommending bodies, but I think you'll find that that's probably the case for most of us. One of my concerns in this area especially is parking. I actually have product like this in my neighborhood with the shared parking and not sufficient parking area in front of the garage, and it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. I've actually gone on Google Earth to your products in Denver and a couple other areas that have this, and you have lots and lots of cars on the street. In the summertime, that might not be a big deal. In the wintertime, it's a very, very big deal. I personally think that it's actually not as safe as having no on-street parking, because you actually have kids that can kind of hide in between cars, and it's not as safe, in my personal opinion. That being said, I know that there are others, including some staff members, that will argue that it slows traffic down, and therefore it's more safe. Regardless, you don't have enough parking here. And one of the things that I was concerned about as I'm looking through, and again, this is just concept, but I see no guest parking. There's no guest parking in these areas.
Well, just as a note, the way that this module works, it's 110 feet wide. And so when you take the 16 feet out in the middle for the driveway, it leaves room for two, on-street parking spaces on either side of the driveway for a 4-pack, right? So you got 2 parking spaces for each unit inside their garage.
Right.
And then 4 guest parking spaces on the street. That's
But
how the
again,
module works.
but again, on-street parking, we won't count for your required parking. Your required parking has to be off-street parking. Okay? So that's just something to look at. Again, also snow storage. So one of the things that we always look at is, where's the snow going to go? I realize we have 0 snow right now. Let it snow, no. So, next week. But one of the things we look at is when you have that storm happen, where are you going to push the snow to? Where is it going to be stored? And as I look at this, how are you going to clear those driveways? Where is it going to go? So just make sure you're keeping that in mind as you're planning these areas. And obviously, that can't be in a required parking spot. It has to be someplace outside of those parking areas. Okay, so I love what you've done with all the trails. I wish that the view corridors continued. So there are some really, can you go back to the main plan again, please, Dave? If you look at your main area between your Central Village Park there, you've got this great view corridor. Oh, wait, there are curves at both ends, and so it stops. So your view doesn't continue all the way out to the river. And that's one of the major things that you could do. You could have it so that you have these incredible views all the way out to the river through your open space if you kind of continue those. And there are several areas like that where next to the north, what are those called? Sorry, I'm trying to move my plan around. Next to the north Westridge Townhomes. Again, you've got that view corridor coming down and it slams right into the townhomes. Perhaps within your townhomes, you're going to continue that, but the way it looks right now. So just as much as you can continue those view corridors down and keep that open feel, it's going to be better. Same thing with on the other side of the elementary school from Riverside through that Overlook development. You've got this great view corridor area, and then it takes that curve, and so all of a sudden it's blocked by houses instead of being able to see out to the river. So just as much as you can open it up, especially where you're packing this product in, we need that open as much as possible. As far as the, I am actually, as far as the access points to the river, I love the open space along the river. Obviously, that has to be open space anyway. You're going to have sensitive lands and things like that. You're not going to be able to put houses right up against it. You're not going to be able to put commercial right up against it. So that's great. I like the usage of the hot pots and the hot springs areas. I think that's great. I like the incorporation of that. My concern for the north access point doesn't bother me quite as much. It's pretty much a straight-in shot off a fairly major road. The south access concerns me because it's in the middle of the neighborhood, and again, where you've not got guest parking, that's going to become overflow parking for the neighborhood, and nobody's going to be able to use it.
And one of the updates you'll notice on this particular plan is we had moved that down off of Pony Express.
Okay.
Those were some of the little finesse things that did change, so.
Got it.
We agree with you on that one.
Okay. So another thing with that is, so I already talked about lack of additional parking. I think the biggest thing you're missing here is, you've put some of the commercial up there by Pioneer, and that makes sense. That's going to be vehicular oriented forever. On Pony, you're really, really missing out, though, because that is going to be transit oriented. It's going to take us a while, but eventually we'll have bus lines, and eventually we'll have BRT, and eventually we'll have actual transit, the tracks or whatever we're going to have there. But you're really, really missing it, because you've got nothing but houses right there, and I can foresee 2 stops in this location. I can foresee a stop on Pony and Old Saratoga Road, and I can foresee a stop on Pony and Redwood Road. And the reason I can see that, first of all, because the commercial nodes and the high schools and everything else right there on Redwood and Pony. And as that's where it's going to kind of curve up and then go to the north up toward the major commercial area. On Pony and Old Saratoga, you've got the sports complex people are going to want to be getting to. You've got the whole city complex that's going to be there. And one of the things that is really nice about being here in this building right now is that our staff has access to jump across the street and run over to One Walk. Or they have access to run over to the different areas and to eat. And here, so this was going to be our business park, right? Business parks have all kinds of ancillary uses like sandwich shops and things like that, little dry cleaners, whatever they can drop off as they're going to work, to and from work. You're missing that. So in my ideal scenario, this would be our business park. If you're going to do this, where that meeting house is, that southeast meeting house, that should be commercial. It really should. It should have the area for the transit stop. It should have the area for the sandwich shops, everything else that the city staff and everybody else is going to be needing to use as they're going back and forth. Also to help with the ballparks. People are going to want to eat when they're there. They're going to want to, hey, I can run over and go grab, Subway or whatever. I don't know what it is, but whatever they're going to want to do while they're at the ballparks. So I think that's a key thing that you're missing right there. That would also help then with that access into the Jordan River area, because you wouldn't be in the middle of a neighborhood again. So all of that area, if you can just kind of look at that and focus on that a little bit more. On the townhomes, so there are a couple of things that, and I realize that you brought in an updated plan. That's one of the frustrations about bringing an updated plan before the meeting that we haven't seen.
Well, and I'll say that nothing material has changed on the plan. It's little like a label here and that parking lot. So the townhomes, all that stuff is the same.
Mostly the same, but for example, in our packet, your townhomes say that they're 4 and 5 unit buildings, and you're now saying they're 4 to 8 unit buildings. That becomes particularly important. So with the pictures that you're showing, if I'm not mistaken, are in Harriman. They might be in one of your other products, but I think it's in Harriman. I could be wrong. Is it in Denver?
West Valley.
Oh, that one's the West Valley? Okay. Regardless, if you look at it, the topography obviously is not a level topography. You've got a hillside because you can see the grass sloping, you can see the roof lines shift as it's going up the hill. Here, you're flat. So if you take it not just from 4 to 5, but all of a sudden to 8, you've got this monolithic building. And your buildings are very, very nice looking. You've got a lot of architectural detail, which is great. But with 8 units stuck together, you're still going to have this just incredible mass of housing all at one level. So really, if we can work toward making sure that that's broken up, 8's a lot to put together, and I realize that, you don't have to have as many roads that way and things like that, but it concerns me. So for me, that actually is kind of a pertinent detail that was changed. Along with that, in Overlook, in our packet, it says that the Overlook area has 6,600 square foot minimum lots. And then you just said that it would be between 4,500 and 6,000, which should have been with your park house area lot sizes, according to our packet. Again, that's pretty huge, because as we're looking at types of housing, we're also looking at lot sizes. And I don't see a lot of variation in your lot sizes. They all look pretty much the same. So I think that, yes, it's great to have variations of houses, and again, you've got great floor plans and lots of different floor plans. But again, to have the variation in lot sizes is important to this area. It helps it flow better, and then people really do have a chance to have different housing lifestyles. One of the, and this is a question for staff, on Dave, on the DAP, the 3-story in the traditional neighborhood, is it just a height limit, or is that a story limit also?
I'd have to look that up. I can do that now if you like. See if I can find.
I think that'd be great to have variation in different housing heights. That's fine. I just don't know if it's actually allowed, so that would be something that we need to make sure we look into. Also, my other concern, of course, is going to be with the apartments. It's very fluid. And you don't have any examples of what it might be. You don't have any examples of really how many dwelling units are actually going to be in there, how much is commercial, how much is how much of that would be apartments that you'd want to do. So having this giant fluid commercial multifamily mixed use label is it needs to be pinned down a little bit better. And I might even consider, I know this has been done in other areas, possibly even looking at, you can't build so many of the apartments until so much of the commercial is done. And the reason I want to do that, first of all, is so that they know that the commercial is actually going to get built, but also to service those apartments that are going to be coming in, so that they're not going to be there. Again, with the apartments do better next to transit. So I'm not sure that that's actually the place where you want the apartments. Houses have cars. Apartments tend to be apartment dwellers with, transit eventually. And I realize that we don't have the transit in place yet. I do realize that. But that's kind of, as you're planning and looking towards the future, that's kind of what I see. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kilgore?
Okay, so one of the things, my major concern, biggest concern is with, again, the Jordan River. And since we're talking about, overall, the context is as a city center DAP. So I'm thinking, and you mentioned this, that it's not, these amenities that you're creating, which are great, by the way, aren't just for this community, but also for the entire city, where it can be. I think the Jordan River is one of those places where it really needs to be that. It's not, the City Council and the Planning Commission have been trying to figure out how to preserve what little waterfront property we have left, because we have basically in the past just had developers come in and just build houses along the edge, and so it's kind of a shared resource that we want to try to preserve as much as possible. And so, to echo council member Shelley's comment. I have my biggest issue is,
It's also what's her face.
my biggest issue is with that southeast, I guess it's the southeast meeting house. That spot right there is where the Jordan River comes around like this, and it's like it's one of the nicest spots. It could be one of the nicest spots. And it's kind of, I'm not LDS, it's kind of a waste to put a church there, I think. As far as overall long-term potential for what that kind of an area could be for looks. Now, I don't think that you have to remove the church. You could maybe just move it over to the west a little bit more, closer to the where the housing is, just so that it doesn't dominate the area and can't be, and prevents any other use for it. Which might be a little bit better for the rest of the city. The other issue I have is, so I live, my house is right on a trail that's along the river, along the lake, and the trail is meant to be used by anyone in the city, but because there's no parking, nobody will use it except for residents in the community. And so I could see that you had the commercial way north, so maybe there's some parking there. But if the city residents are to use enjoy the Jordan River Park, the Jordan River area, there has to be some way for them to get there and park and then get there. You're talking about paddle boards and those kinds of things. Unless there's a rental right there, there's just no way for people to access to bring their things without parking on other people's streets. And so I think that's something that maybe as a city we should also be considering all the time, is when we create these attractions with the waterfront, there has to be a way for people to get there, rather than just saying, oh, here's a trail for everybody to use, but nobody will use it except for the residents, the local residents. So that's something I'd like you to consider. That's one of the reasons why I think when I say it's a waste to have the church there, if you move it over, maybe there's a way that you can create that, especially if you do consider that Pony Express may be a major, a great commercial area. So maybe that's one thing. One thing I'd like to bring up to the city as well as the Planning Commission, is maybe to consider as we go forward, is we have no, what's it called, a mixed water front buffer overlay in this area. And we went to a lot of trouble to...
There's no overlay in this area?
Well, it looks like, based on what I see here, I don't see any kind of a reservation for an overlay type of thing. I may be wrong.
Hope so.
I just,
if I'm not mistaken, our overlay should go over all zones.
Right, but that was, I don't think, doesn't that require an amendment or Because right now it's agriculture, I believe. It's in,
That's the zone.
right, that's the zone. But if we wanted to put an overlay, that would require like an amendment or it would require an action on our part. And it's not something I'm not sure that the clients or the applicants actually know about. And since we went to a lot of trouble of creating that overlay zone, that buffer overlay zone, I think it's something that maybe we should consider.
Well, you know, as we understand your chapter.
The general plan, but it's not zoned yet.
Well, you have a criteria in your development code that requires any properties along the river frontage and the lake to meet these certain setbacks and criteria. And I can say that, you know, our goal is to have this community meet your development code and criteria to the greatest extent practical, and to things like these carriage house products as we develop that, and in areas along you know, how our townhomes are oriented and things. We might request some alley standards or some other development criteria that aren't addressed in your code, but we are looking to meet the town's criteria, you know, 99.5% of the time. So we're going to respect and cooperate with the city on those setbacks and buffer requirements that you currently have in the code.
And I appreciate that. Is there? I think it was all along. Okay, that's the general. Okay, I didn't see that in mine, I guess. Okay, yeah, so anyway, there is a waterfront buffer overlay zone, actually, and so it would be nice to make sure that that's on your plan as well, just so that we understand that, yeah, that we're trying to preserve that as much as possible in order to make it accessible to the rest of the city, residents. Working.
Just a note here, just the screen here shows the general plan, and what they're talking about is this mixed waterfront land use, which is in a couple areas here. So yes, it is not on the general plan map. It is not included on this property. Mm-hmm.
Not zoning. Yeah, it's not a zone, it's
Right.
just an overlay. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to
There's
make
an
sure
overlay.
that the applicant is aware that there is that zone, or, I'm sorry, the overlay. Yeah, and so, okay, and then, I was just wondering if, we have a open space amenity calculation process in our code. And I was wondering if that's something that we're going to require or ask the applicant to do in figuring out the kinds of amenities. You have, I know, in your concept plan, you talk about how you want to make it as varied as possible, but we already have a point system where, you know, we've come up with, it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily something that you have to use there, but.
Well, the district area plan that we, you know, can operate under kind of puts it back on us to create that, our own kind of table and kind of table of values, if you will, but we'll certainly be referring back to the code and seeing how you guys structure the point system there and making sure we meet the intent.
That's terrific. And then I noticed that on, let's see, it's page 44, but let's see. On your regional retail, you have pictures, great pictures of what it should look like, and it would be great if that's what it looks like for us as well. But I noticed that there's no picture of like a big box retail, like Smith's or Walmart, where you have this expanse of this ocean of parking lot. And what do you do, you know, with that? I mean, it's great that that store is great because that's what everyone needs. But at the same time, we have that parking lot, and it's not something that's walkable, you know, I would think. So it's when you show the pictures that's the, yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to have those kinds of businesses, but I wonder if it does become a big box type of thing, then how do we you know, maintain the walkability?
So, you know, I think Councilmember Barch, thank you, Shelley. I think her comments were very pertinent to the location, right? Because we've got nodes where we can access commercial sites. Pony Express does limit access quite a bit, vehicular. But, you know, if we have the correct location for our pedestrian trails along the edges that tie into the communities, and then we put the commercial that can be reached by the residents as well as by folks in cars and public transit, then everybody gets the benefit of the commercial. And I would just say to your question about size, our current commercial parcels as sized are going to be more suited to a neighborhood services commercial as opposed to a big box, right? We've got 5 acres plus or minus on the west side. So that's maybe some pads, but maybe it's some nice inline with some restaurants and dry cleaners and that kind of thing. I'd say it's likely that in the north area as well, if we have a mix of apartments, multifamily and commercial, so we might have, if that's 20 acres, 15, we might have 10 or 12 of apartments and, the balance in commercial. So again, maybe some offices and maybe some neighborhood services and retail.
Okay. Yeah, that would be terrific. This summer I walked from Jiffy Lube to Coffee Creations, and it's like a quarter of a mile or something, but it was basically all parking lot. And it was as hot as heck, and I was sweaty by the time I was done. And before I got back to my car at Jiffy Lube, I had already drunk everything, and I don't know what we can do, because we have the sidewalks and everything, but it is mostly parking lot, and then you cross the street, and then it's parking lot again. And it just doesn't feel walkable, something that I don't think I'll do that ever again. So I hope we don't. So hopefully we can avoid that kind of thing. But anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.
So I'm not going to repeat. I don't think it's necessary to repeat, but I will say that I didn't hear one thing that Councilwoman Barch said that I would disagree with. So now you have 2. And I appreciate, Ken, your comments as well. You touched on some different things that had not been touched on by Councilwoman Barch, and I appreciated that, especially along the riverfront and the walkability, all of those things, because that is one of the things we have. So you guys pride yourself in being a master development community developer. Well, we are priding ourselves in being a master developed city. Like, we have worked really hard to have land use maps and transportation maps, and we spent a lot of hours. I point to the Planning Commission too, because it's a group effort here, and that's why we have everyone here today, because there's a lot of work to do those things. We have strategic plans. I'm sure you've seen our strategic plan. I'd hope you have, because that's what the residents specifically have said, and as a representative of those residents, I want to make sure I'm listening to them and we're implementing that. So, and then in transparency, I have met with Oakwood on a one-on-one basis to have a conversation before, and I expressed a lot of my concerns and frustrations as well. I don't see many of those being taken into consideration here, and so I think it's an ongoing process, and so I'm happy to have more conversations as we go forward. A couple of the things that I do want to reiterate and then maybe add a little bit are view corridors. I think when Shelley was talking about that, there's something else I want to point out. Pony Express curves very quickly. You have no real queuing opportunity, and you're making from a transportation or from a security perspective, I do have rights. We gave a lot of rights away for all the church property to get this annexed into the city, but there's certain things that you can't do. You can't make it unsafe. And I really do see this as a real problem. The state is spending, I don't even know how much money to fix the Grandview curve. I call it the Grandview to Centennial curve. That's a huge nightmare. It's very dangerous. We have a little flashing light that makes no sense and all these things. I'm concerned that we're going to have the same thing here. I don't believe that you've gone in far enough before you start the curve. Pioneer Crossing, there's a couple that have become problematic for Pioneer Crossing, have become real issues as well. And so let alone view corridors, you also need to be able to know that cars are stopped ahead. And I'm worried that that sharp curve up, almost like an S curve, is not effective. I think that the sensitive lands, I would reiterate, I don't believe in the district area, this district area plan that you have, that has been removed, but I don't think you get full credit for sensitive lands. Because you can't develop on it doesn't mean that you get to then just declare that all of your open space, but you actually don't get full credit on the open space, I believe. We'll have to look into that some more. In our other parts of our city, that's always the case. If it's a steep grade, you can't say, oh, I'm going to give all the mountain to to open space, and it's not usable, you can't walk on it or anything. So just because because it's a wetland or in the floodplain of the river, you don't get full credit for that. I will say this, in terms of the municipal area and all of that, I'll just I appreciate you addressing that, because that was a real flag for me. Transparency, I immediately called Mark and asked them about that, and he got clarification, because it looked like you were using that as a credit towards your open space, and I'd appreciate the clarifications today. But just know that I'll never, even if it's close, give any credit for full-priced land that we've had to buy. We didn't get to buy it at open space price. We had to buy it at full residential price. And that's how we're going to have to buy in the future. And then I would work closely with the church on maybe getting access to some of that 25 acres that that they did not. It's a credit. They didn't just give it to the city, because if they gave it to the city, then you wouldn't be able to get those 25 credits. It was, and reason of giving it was for future access to open space credit, and at the value of what that open space credit is about. So maybe you might be able to go into an agreement with them and buy some of that. But that 25 acres would be the only part that you would ever be able to count towards this, especially because we're paying full price. And then just one point of clarification, because you said it multiple times on the record, and so I just want to clarify that you said that when you started that this whole area was all in your plan. Well, that might have been a poor communication from the landowner to you, but we had been in conversations with them about the municipal park and the extended sports area, rec area, long before your conversation started in June. So it wasn't like we just jumped in and all of a sudden had a big interest in this. It's something that we've been talking to them about for a long time, since the baseball park itself was the first 25 acres. It was always talked about pulling down more acreage, and then also the 26 acres for the municipal park came up a little bit later since we surrounded that. But those kinds of conversations have been happening for a while. In terms of flow and where you're putting your densities, I just think that I actually did some research. Instead of just letting you do your marketing pieces, the best pictures, I always joke, it's like marketing's like the selfie. We always take a nice high shot. You took a lot of nice high shots to show more open space, because if you're in a car, it's not nearly as nice. And so I went on Google Earth, and it's great because they have cars that have driven through some of your neighborhoods, and so we can actually see. It's much more dense than what is showing in the pictures you're showing, which is fine. You have a right to that. But I think we need to be clear here that you're putting a lot of units in this space, and it's going to have a very dense feel if it's not done right. The last two comments, because I don't really think at this point I think we can have other conversations. We're going to have plenty of conversations going forward. I hate the apartments at the entrance to the city. I've made that very clear. I think that is, I don't care if it's economically feasible, it's just not a good neighbor to the city. You're coming in trying to be part of our city, and you're saying that you have all this interest to be a good partner and do everything to our code. Well, I personally am begging you to not put the apartments within 500 feet of the sign that says Saratoga Springs. You know? But like that to me, it's like, that's where, I mean, pretty much right now, all of Eagle Mountain pretty much comes through there. Saratoga Springs residents. When Pony Express opens, there'll be a portion that will use that, and then there'll be a portion that still uses Pioneer Crossing. It just makes me almost ill to think of apartments there. And then you want to see a room full of people. They're not here today because I actually put the kibosh on quite a few groups that were going to come. So it says it's not productive at this time. Let me try first. But it doesn't take me very long to get standing room only. I've done it before, and I can do it again. And I'm not doing that as a threat, but I'm just doing that to let you know that if you say that you're going to put apartments right there at the entrance to the city, it will not be hard for this to have 400 people here to fight that. Did you know the history of our city? There, one of the only successful referendums in Utah County, 2 of them passed and not too long ago, and those residents are really fired up already about your neighbor to the south of you, and then also all that you're doing here. So again, we just want to make sure that we're doing all that we can. The last point, I did say there was 2. The last point is so much of your open space is linear. You can't count our nice regional park that we created. Your open space is linear open space. There's a place for that, but then there's also a place for congregational open space where you can actually come together as a group and as a community and create that sense of community. So with that, I think today that's probably okay, and we can have more conversations in the future. So thank you very much.
Commissioner.
Okay. So I'll just start with saying I live in the neighborhood directly south, in a rear-loaded or alley-loaded cottage. So it's a small lot, small yard. My garage backs up to an alley. I love that product. I'm so happy you're offering it. It keeps the front parkways really just neat and nice looking. Along those lines, I do have some questions and some concerns. So when you're on Riverside, are there backyards coming up to Riverside, or is it front? Is that going to be the front?
It'd be the back.
That's going to be the back, okay. And you are going to keep that roundabout there, so it'll be 3 roundabouts? Okay. And there'll be snow removal from the HOA in those areas? 2? 2? Is there a third one here on Pony Express?
No,
Not yet, okay. So it'll just be those 2. Okay. I like the Paseo area with the green space in front, extended green space. I think that's really great. And question about the carriage houses. So on here, they're just these little brown squares. I mean, how many houses are you putting in that carriage house? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, each of those squares is a 4-unit cluster.
So there's quite a bit of homes in on those rows.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not a lot, and I know this has been said, there's not a lot of green space in those areas. A lot of people in a small area to have no green space. Could we take out some of the houses and put in maybe some of those congregational meeting areas? If you're going to put, what is that, 4, 8, 16, 24, that's a lot of houses in that little area to not have anywhere for them to go when they want to recreate. I know I appreciate that in my neighborhood, and there's not enough. There's never enough. So more green space, echoing what everybody else has already said. Same with the commercial. I think you could just reconfigure it a little bit better, even keeping in mind the waterfront overlay. If you could activate that area a little more with some retail, that would be great. I'd love to be able to walk to some of that. There's a lot of people here that would appreciate that. Same with the municipal complex. I mean, the points she made about places to go to lunch for employees, where are they going to go? You know, there's nowhere. They'll have to drive, which is unfortunate because we want it to be walkable, especially with this nice regional sports park right here. So I think you could also do away with that meeting house over there. I have an issue with the school site. I think it's a little too close to commercial and multifamily. That's just my personal opinion there. I don't know that I would want my child's elementary school to be right next to a big commercial or multifamily development. And I know that's not totally in your control, and you've worked with the school district on that, but I just think that's something to reconsider. I also have a question about, I wanted to comment on the 0 lot line carriage house comment. So will those have fencing? Will they have backyards, these carriage houses?
Pardon me?
Will they have backyards and they'll have fencing?
Yes,
Are you
they
going to
do.
put in the fencing, or do they have to put in the fencing, split it with their neighbors? You'll put it in. So the concern about maybe touching your neighbor's house won't be as pertinent if they're going to have fences there.
Sorry, I'll jump in on that one. The way they've got it set up right now, the fence, literally, part of the fence is your neighbor's house.
Okay.
So if they move that fence away from that, so it's not a 0 lot line, then that's different. But the way they've got it illustrated, they're using the house as part of the fence right now.
So you don't have any yard then? It's just your neighbor's house next to it? Is that?
No, there is yard there. It just runs over to the house, as you pointed out.
Your neighbor's house?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm just trying to visualize that there. I know
We'd be happy to take people out and tour.
Yeah.
Available here tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd love to see what that looks like, because I'm trying to think of that in terms of like the way our cottages are structured. The yards are on alternating sides, so you don't touch your neighbor's house when you're out barbecuing. but I don't know. I'll have to look at it and see specifically what that looks like, because that would be a little concerning to me as well. Right, and I'm so glad. Even though I love my neighbors, I don't want to touch their house when I'm outside. So I'm glad, and I'm glad you're putting in the fencing, because that's great. I don't have to negotiate with my neighbor to split our fence, you know. I hate cars parking on the street, and cars park in front of my house all the time, because I live right on Legacy Parkway, and it's the worst. So if you could have other areas for parking, I think you would be just doing fantastic.
Trust this computer. Trust this computer.
And I know everybody comments on the parking too, but it is really important, and it just looks ugly when the cars are parked on the street, and it's a nuisance for those people who live there, and they're walking across the street to see somebody else. You know, they're not my guests that are parking there, but they're parking in front of my home because there's nowhere else for them to park, or there's very minimal parking that maybe some of the people who live there actually have to use. Okay, and then I also had another question. So this area is heavily trafficked by antelope certain parts of the year. Where are they going to go? Do you have an idea of how they're going to be pushed out, or?
Haven't given the wildlife migration pattern any serious study at this point.
Okay, I'd love to see that. I see them in this field all the time. They come across Redwood somehow with their lives still intact and make it over to this Riverside lot. So I'd love to see what that's going to look like. Other than that, I would love to see more green space in between some of these houses, even if it's between backyards. I know there are some areas like that. And I like that you've had 2 clubhouses. I think that is critical. One clubhouse is going to get pretty packed for a neighborhood like this, and I can speak to that from experience. Other than that, I love the product. If the commercial over here on the north end was ground level retail, I love it even more. If there was more retail along the river, commercial along the river, I think that'd be great. It would cost you some homes, but I would think your customers would love it. I would love it living directly. I only wish I could live in this development, but I already live in the one next door. I would love to see some more area for commercial and retail in there. That's it.
Councilman Porter.
All right. My list isn't quite as long as Councilwoman Barsh, so hopefully I'll go quickly. We do like to tease.
Even though his list is shorter, he'll find a way to talk longer. So.
This is probably true. So I'm going to try not to reiterate too much that's already been said. I'll start with the things I like. I like the promenade, I guess is what you're calling it, along the river. I like having that open space. The access to it, I like that you moved the parking lot. I think that solves one issue of people having to drive through the neighborhood to get to it. I mean, the parking, I know this is illustrative and not necessarily a design plan, but those are really tiny parking lots for the amount of use I would expect to see of the riverfront area. You know, we are a city of 30,000. We will be a city of, you know, somewhere in the 100,000 range. Having 16 parking spots is probably not quite adequate. If you want that to become something that the entire city can access and use. Looking at the plan, I do like what I've termed the decentralized density. I like that you've spread out the townhomes and the carriage houses throughout the community. A lot of times we get these plans for planned communities and it's just these big chunks, you know, all the apartments here, all the townhomes here, all the single family homes here. and sometimes that causes more you know, it's easy to say like, well, we're just going to push the problem over into this one corner and try and ignore that it's even there. But I think this way, the neighborhoods flow better. You're going to get a more viable neighborhood from you know, the type of people you're going to have. Both, you know, shorter term people, you know, different mixture of families rather than, you know, my neighborhood. I think everybody's birthday is probably in a 10-year window. So I like that it's kind of spread out, and that's, I think, part of the plan, part of the idea behind the planned community is that you can kind of spread those out rather than laying down big chunks all on one site. I like that you have a school site. I like that you've worked with the district to try and secure that and figure that out from the get-go. That is something that we definitely need in our city. We're constantly growing, constantly having children, so we need more schools. And the fact that you have some of these, I guess you're terming them overlook, it is, the sizes are very similar in some instances, but I like that you do actually have some traditional, what I consider a traditional neighborhood type product in here, rather than just packing in as many townhomes as you possibly could fit on the property. Let's see, I have a few questions. Well, I'll talk about the bad, and then I'll get to the questions. Overall, you know, I would like to see less density. This maybe isn't even for Oakwood. This is for Thane and Sean sitting in the. I did some rough back of the envelope calculations, and you guys are at 23% with this of the DAP being under development. And you're also at roughly 23% of the housing units. Now, the rest of the DAP is considerably more dense than what this portion is shown in all of your options. So I'm starting to wonder how you're going to be able to provide those other uses if you've used up all of your density on the properties you've already developed. So I realize there's some commercial and stuff in there, and so there's you know, those numbers aren't hard and fast. They're just really back of the envelope calculations. But if we have developed the two least dense areas of the district area plan and we're already at a 1-for-1, then I don't see how you're going to get more dense. So just be aware of that. Yeah, I have a note here about the city park being used in the open space calculations, but we've talked about that, and so I would like to see more commercial, especially along Pony Express. I think that, you know, with a regional park where you're going to have tournaments, I mean, we designed this to bring in out-of-town people so that they can come and play here and enjoy our city, as well as pay for our park for us. So, you know, that's I think you're missing out on some opportunities there. And as was stated, this is going to be the transit area, and I get that you guys aren't going to see the transit probably even while you're developing. You'll be gone by that point. However, our job is not to just look at your development through your development time scale, but our city and the long term. And if we're going to have tracks or some similar thing running down Pony Express, these housing types don't make a lot of sense next to that. One thing I would, the open space along the regional park, we have the hot springs. As part of looking at that park, we looked at some possibilities. It's not, I don't believe that that's actually included in our park. The land that we purchased and were granted, it's outside and it's in your property. But we had looked at some ideas of ways to develop it. Just, you know, since we have a parking lot 15 feet away, we figured we might as well look at it. And, you know, we had some ideas for beach areas and stuff so that kids could get in the water and kind of, you know, recreate around that area. On the west side of that, I see houses right up against it. I would like to see a little bit more space there so that you know, it is a linear park, but I think it would be nice to be able to use it from both sides rather than just from the one side. The multifamily up along Pioneer Crossing. You know, when you find me and Michael agreeing on something so vehemently, watch out. This is a gateway to our city, and for the first thing somebody sees when they drive into our city is to be an apartment block is just not, you know, not something I want, not something I can, you know, yeah, it's tough. You know, I proposed, you know, we had discussions, speaking of things we disagreed about where the municipal campus should go. So, you know, I wanted something, as we're driving into the city, I want us to focus on commercial. I want that to be, you know, what people see when they come in. This is a vibrant city that's got commerce going on. This is, I mean, it's right along a major transit corridor. This needs to be commercial. I would just get rid of the multifamily, the multi-use. I think it should just be commercial.
Just that a little bit. How can we do that? Animating where the multifamily would be, we have heard repeatedly about not having it front Pony Express. And so it's in that entire parcel, but has been intended to be on the south end of that parcel with commercial on the north end.
Okay.
So we didn't do a great job of demonstrating that, but we have heard that comment.
Okay. And, you know, and along with the, you know, the parcel that you guys don't control, you know, we're hoping to see that develop as a commercial use, and so I think that it would make more sense for that whole area to just be a commercial use. I think, again, the multifamily, if you're going to have that in your development, makes more sense along the transit corridor rather than along that particular road. Okay, questions. And I know we're at a conceptual phase, and so I don't know exactly what you have figured out. But these river access points, what do you envision them being? I mean, are you talking about a boat ramp, or are you talking about like a boardwalk? Like, I mean, just what are you envisioning by river access? It could be almost anything.
To your point, it's very early. I think even our parking lots are just representative of, hey, this is a location where river access will occur that will benefit the public.
Okay.
We'll certainly work with staff to get the size correct. But, you know, this is an open space park, so we're looking at, you know, paved and soft surface trails. We're looking at trailhead locations that have parking lots that, you know, might have restrooms or trailhead kiosks, that type of thing. Some, you know, I don't know that boat ramp is the correct term, but, you know, access ramps down into the river so that people can walk non-motorized type watercraft,
right,
paddle boards and kayaks and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But, you know, to Councilmember McCumber's question about sensitive lands, this is a great time to clarify. We don't have anything that would qualify under your code as sensitive lands here. We don't have any jurisdictional wetlands, and the floodplain is contained within the immediate bank of the river, so we don't have expanding floodplain zones outside of the river corridor itself. So these are all usable open space areas.
Okay.
But hopefully that answered your question about what we're thinking right now.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, like I said, I know it's early, and so we can continue to have that conversation with staff, just, you know, making sure that, you know, my question, I think, partially had to do with the parking, is like, what if we're offering access into the water, you're going to need more parking, but.
Councilman, if I could just, They added these as part of our request, because if you recall, we've got a grant where we're going to be putting put-ins along the river in a couple of locations, and we figured that if we could put some takeouts on the opposite side of the river in some of those areas, it'll give kind of key access points for people that are paddleboarding, canoeing, fishing, kayaking,
Right.
whatever they're doing in there. So they've incorporated that, and I think, as we start developing ours, I think we can use that as a model to help tie into what they're conceptualizing, and frankly, I think it's a good effort, because it'll put takeouts on the opposite side of the river as opposed to just all of them on the Jordan River side or the Jordan River Trail side at this point.
Right. No, and I think it's great having those there. I just want to make sure that they're usable for the entire community if that's the intention. The cottage homes, you've already heard a lot about those. I'm not going to talk about that aspect of it. My question was, so you have, with the townhomes, you said you have parking enough for 2 cars outside as well as 2 cars in the garage. But with these cottage homes, from the pictures you showed, it's just the garage. There's no stacked parking. And so that concerns me, just, from the point that was made, is you've got 4 to 6 homes and you have maybe 4 spots that are available, and those are the only guest parking spots is on street. That doesn't really jive with what we've done elsewhere in the city. You talked a lot about basements. Is it even possible to get basements in this area? Chriselle can probably speak to that.
Yes.
You can get basements in this area. Okay.
Just like the Alamo.
All right. So, if you can find spots where the water table will allow you, more power to you. It's just, I heard all these square footage and the size of the homes and stuff that you could fit in these lots, and some of them seemed like they were including the basements and stuff, and
There's basements throughout Legacy Farms.
Are there? Okay. And then, let's see, I talked about what Councilman McComber hit on. Councilman Barch, I hit on the commercial along Pony. I would like to see more there, even if it's just the neighborhood commercial. I think you're going to want people are going to want to be able to get a snack. We shouldn't necessarily cut our own concessions at the knees, but, sometimes a hot dog is not enough, and you want, Jimmy John's, or I'm not gonna suggest Subway because I think we have enough in the city, but something. The eightplexes, anybody that wants to see what it's like to live in a neighborhood with eightplexes, you can go over to the Cove at Jordan River, where I used to live.
This might not be as long.
Yeah, I'm taking a while, I know. You keep interrupting me, I'm going to take longer. So I'm just saying that I'm not saying that you shouldn't have any eightplexes. I would prefer you didn't, but if they're used sparingly in 1 or 2 places, it's not that bad. But if they all of a sudden start popping up where you've got a lot of them, it's going to really impact the neighborhood and its enjoyability. So, and I'll stop there so that council will stop making fun of me.
Oh. 5 down, 7 to go. Anybody need a break? Okay. Commissioner Chapman.
I appreciate the thoroughness of what's been said. I disagree with very little or none. I will just emphasize a couple of things. One, if you look at on Pioneer Crossing heading west, where it becomes straight off of the curve as it crosses the river, especially at rush hour, that is still not a lot of time to see cars that are stopped, especially turning left onto Redwood. And you have the entirety, at least in the concept of the Pony Express Parkway, a curve. And so where there's, debatable distance on Pioneer Crossing, that whole thing is a curve. So, I could see that being a fairly large safety issue, just awareness of where cars are, and I guess the queue is the proper term to call that. Second, just reiterating that there's a lot of trails, and those are great. There's very little chunks of green space, and the chunks that you do have listed, are kind of earmarked, it looks like, as a clubhouse or a pool. and some other things, pavilion. So once those are in, I wonder how much, open space there's actually going to be there. I find it interesting that there's 2 chunks listed or parks, the village parks listed for a clubhouse or a pool in the north, but not any in the south. And so, there's 2 within walking distance in the north, and then there's nothing in the south. There's a one in a 5-acre park and then some townhomes. And so I'm curious as to why there's 2 within a stone's throw in the north and nothing in the south for the residents down there. It seems like, it's kind of the same shape or same area as the ones in the north. You just stuck some townhomes in there rather than just leaving it green space, perhaps. But that would be something I think you consider as making that a little more enticing for those people in the south. And then I agree with the commercial. I think Pony Express is a great place to offer some commercial, and so potentially reevaluate that. And then I don't think anybody in here is going to disagree that nothing says welcome to Saratoga like apartment complexes. I just envision towels hanging from a balcony drying off, or who knows what you're going to get. But I mean, that's seems to go contrary to everything that Saratoga has kind of laid for the future, is having residential there. Even with it to the south, you probably get some pushback. So rather than regurgitate, I will forego further comments.
Efficiency. Okay, Councilman Podeska, the example's been set. Just kidding. Take the time you need.
All right.
Time.
All right, thanks. All right, so was it Glenn?
I'm Josh.
Josh, sorry. So Josh and Sam, appreciate the work that you've put into this. Actually went today and looked at some of the products, Sam, and hands down, it's incredible. I think you build a great product. The homes look fantastic. So as far as any sort of questions or critique on this, it's not going to be on the product. I think you bring a great product, so happy to see you come in. I do like the open space along Jordan River as well. The access points there are great. The other things brought up about parking and whatnot, agree there. I do also want to see the commercial, or most of it, come from Pioneer down to Pony Express. I agree with Ken in moving that meeting house and Councilwoman Barch over to that village park in the center there, to kind of match all the other meeting houses there. And then have that eastern part of Pony Express a commercial area. And so one of the thoughts is a suggestion is possibly having that commercial with housing on top as an alternative to doing apartments right there at the entrance of Pioneer, or using up some of the townhomes. But I think that would be a unique aspect of having commercial on the ground floor and then some housing on top of that. Then, let's see. I'm concerned with the wall of homes, the carriage houses along Riverside, the east side of Riverside Drive. As I mentioned, looking at the products in, what was it called? Holbrook Farms. So the carriage houses that are going in there, the backyards look to be about 5 or 6 feet depth. And so that doesn't really create that much of a buffer to Riverside Drive. And so seeing all those homes stacked up along that for such a long distance, I think we just create this barrier kind of feel as you're coming in from from Pioneer Crossing, coming down. So suggestions of breaking that up, alternating it with some other product. I also have big concerns with the parking with the carriage houses, and driving by those, seeing that, and also the illustrations, seeing that there's no parking in the driveways, and then also just a few, that's one additional parking spot per carriage home in that area. Let's see. Something to keep in mind when this gets developed more is the driveways that I'm looking for, and I know a lot of the council's looking for as well, is 25 foot in length to the sidewalk, so that we don't have any trucks or cars that are overhanging on the sidewalk. We have a lot of problems with that in other neighborhoods, and so in spacing requirements for all these products, of trying to maintain that 25 foot to the sidewalks. And that is, yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, Commissioner Still.
By what I like.
Me too, sorry.
Let me now scroll down. Y'all, there. I'll start with what I do like. I spent the better part of a year meeting with SLR in trying to create a form-based code. And we didn't quite get there. And you have come in with something that is as close to it as I've seen by having your community activities in the center of these areas. I would hope that we will see more product than just the Park House and the Carriage House and the Overlook and the townhomes, and this is a big project, so I hope that we get more diversity. So that, and what we were trying to do with form-based code, by the way, is you start out living in a townhome when you're first married. And then as you start having children, you need more space, and so you would go into a park house, and then, or Carriage House, and then you would go into the Overlook. And unfortunately, the Overlook, there are not that many of them in some of the squares. But the thing was that even though I'm not LDS, I understand that when you start out with a particular ward, you like to stay there because you know the people, and so that it works that you don't have to move, but you have an influx of young people coming into the townhomes. So I basically like the layout of that. I agree on the carriage houses that zero lot lines. If you're a nurse and you're a day sleeper and you've got a little kid next door that decides that they want to play volleyball against your bedroom wall, no fun. So I think I think everybody's pretty well said that that's not really an option. Then we get to Pony Expressway. And I am going to go back and quote Sam, that you create places to live, work, and play. Well, we got the living, and we kind of got the playing, but we don't have the working. And since we've already started the concept of offices with the city complex, it would seem that next to the parks, at least, that we get some business park in there, some office buildings. That will cut down on complaints about noise, and it will give a good buffer, and it will give a place for people to work, as well as Pony Expressway is going to be where the transit is. And if you're going to have transit, it makes sense to have a place for people to work. And I'd like to see that whole area from 400 South to Pony Expressway reworked, rethought a little bit, so that we can have some place for people to work and work at jobs other than being a waitress at a restaurant. A family supporting jobs. And I think this is an ideal place to have it because of what's around it. So, nobody else has brought that up, but I've been thinking about that a lot. And I'll ask the staff this, who is dictating the alignment of Pony Expressway?
So what you're seeing with this alignment, if you could see just underneath the surface of the fields, is you'd actually see a sewer line that comes out of Eagle Mountain. I believe it's about a 48-inch sewer line. And so the Pony Express bed that we're talking about is really following that utility corridor. And so I understand what their design is they're trying to use the maximum efficiency by keeping that road on that already fairly large corridor. And it's not an exact match. It comes in, but they're trying to swoop it down so that then it captures that alignment from an efficiency standpoint, since you're already going to have some fairly large setbacks off of that size of a pipe. So I think that's dictating a lot of where that alignment is looking like. Also, on the extreme east end, you also have to line it up with a bridge. And so you're going to have to kind of have the right angle coming into the bridge. And so that swoop actually helps you get aligned with that bridge. And, ultimately, the big question will be, what does Pony Express look like? We know what it looks like from Redwood Road west to Eagle Mountain City Center. Right now, it's not utilized very well going to the east. We are having conversations with UDOT, with Eagle Mountain, with Lehigh, with American Fork about how does this connect in over to ultimately light rail in American Fork, and how does this alignment ultimately connect in to basically kind of a Pioneer Crossing light, if you would, on alignment that would move a significant amount of traffic east-west. And so it's pretty critical. I think the bend, as some of your suggestions have been, it could come out. I think from an efficiency standpoint, that's part of the balancing question of how do we build a roadway that's efficient and sharing that right-of-way with that sewer easement, because they're already going to have some restrictions on what they can do over that. But ultimately, our goal is to connect from Redwood Road. Ultimately, if we can get it connected to Old Saratoga Road in one of these early phases, and maybe it starts off as more of a local road, then MAG funding, state funding, other funding might become available for future expansions and things of that nature. I don't think we're going to go and build the 5-6 lane width that ultimately will be there at build out, but I do think that some connectivity is critical, especially in the next couple of years, for us to be able to try and take some of the pressure off of Redwood Road from Pony to Pioneer Crossing and then points northward. And so ultimately I think it's going to be a really important connective piece for us, and we're glad to work with them on trying to find the right alignment and the right layout for that. And then obviously, start with what's an appropriate sized road and then grow from there, because unfortunately that bridge is going to be $10-15 million reconstruct, and right now it's 2 lanes, and so that's kind of the max capacity right now is what we can get across that is those 2 very narrow 2 lanes. So yeah, so but those are the points that we're kind of looking at on that alignment.
Commissioner Steele, could I just follow up on one thing? Are they taking into account like turn radiuses and stuff for light rail when we're planning? Because we don't want to have to realign this road in 30 years when they finally get tracks out here.
And that is part of the broader discussion. We do show on our light rail, we do show that as a light rail corridor. And when that bridge gets rebuilt, we'll probably adjust it at that point so that it meets all those things. But in today's world, us connecting to the existing bridge in Old Saratoga Road is critically important, and we want to make sure that we get it right. But the reality is there's probably going to be some fudge once we get when we rebuild that bridge. We're going to have to probably build it in a parallel location so that we can continue to have some traffic flow during the time it's going to take to build that bridge, and then switch traffic over things. We're certainly looking at that. In fact, we're putting forward a concept MAG plan. We were able to get consensus just today with American Fork, Lehigh, Eagle Mountain, and us. All 4 of us are putting in for a corridor alignment study and corridor study for what this is going to look like, especially as it comes and connects in over in Lehigh in the Vineyard Connector. And so much bigger planning issue, but each of the communities would participate with the roughly $14,000 match, our proportionate share. So fairly nominal, but we think a very wise investment for a long-term planning tool.
And we just need to be careful because Draper lost their light rail because they had too tight of turns. I sat there in those meetings because the one at Redwood Road, I think that's too tight for light rail.
Well, I asked a loaded question, I guess. But,
It's like a little jack in the box.
I look at the way they've laid things out, and I thought there had to be a pretty good reason that there was that curve there. I agree that I think the meeting house on Pony Expressway looks like that you didn't know where else to put it, so you just plopped it there. And I think there's no way you can walk to it. So I really think that needs to be moved. I'd like to see you lose the Overlook houses right there that go into that area. And then, I think everybody has said commercial there. I would like to see a little wider space. What is from the curve, the horseshoe in the river, what's the widest point of green space? Do you have any idea?
So you're just asking specifically about the area where the horseshoe is?
Well, along the river there, but that looks like the best place to have a little bit wider space.
I believe our minimum setback is 85 feet from the river across the entire corridor, and it's bigger in some areas. And that kind of speaks back to your code that has those buffer in there.
Unfortunately, I read this book, and I don't know if you've read it. But we need a gathering place on the river for all the citizens. I personally would like to see splash days either at the river or the lake. Right now, it's in Neptune Park, and that's fine, but we have these wonderful waterways, and we're not really utilizing them in a manner that we could. And as far as the multifamily, I'm going to read from our general plan and what the residential areas, the objectives were, and this is multifamily. Locate new multifamily and increased density housing in appropriate areas. Provide for higher density housing where appropriate in walkable, mixed-use areas near shopping, offices, healthcare, and transportation centers. So when I asked you to rethink that area, maybe that is a place that we could use some higher density housing. Done right on the transportation corridor might just work. And it wouldn't be at the gateway of the city. And so, as I say, I'd just like to see you really rethink that area. I think there could be some really neat things done and make it work for everybody. Let's see. Commercial and economic development. Objective, balance local job and household growth. Support employment growth for the city by providing local housing options for new employees and to create opportunities to transform existing commercial areas into more dynamic and productive mixed-use areas. And again, this is balancing the jobs and the housing. Because right now, we are jobs poor. Most everybody is having to leave the city every day, and that causes congestion and air pollution, and it's expensive for people to have to commute. So if we can start getting some jobs in, it would really help our community. Let's see. I was a little concerned that you were talking about some of your Overlook homes are up to 6,000 square feet, and your lots are just a little over 6,000 square feet maximum. I realize you're going to go up, but still, that's an awful lot of house on a small lot. And to me, you need a little bit larger lot. Where I come from, R6 house, that would be what we call R6 housing. And I was a realtor, and I sold one of those. And when you can go out on your balcony and you can look down 10 houses this way, 10 houses across the green space, 10 houses this way, and 10 houses across, and tell what everybody is having for dinner because they're cooking out on their grill, and they are, you know, you can tell what they're doing. And when you're putting them in on a grid like this, that's going to happen. So I hope that maybe we could get even more of a mix of housing in those areas so that you aren't looking down that far. And then I think my last thing is going to be, well, two things, or I guess just one. A very good friend of mine from California, planner, came to see me in August. And we drove down Redwood Road, and she said, "Sandy, how did you let this come in? These houses that back up onto Redwood Road look terrible. How did you let that happen? Please don't let me have her come again and see the houses, the new houses, the same way. Let's put some on the main streets, when the houses back up to it, let's put some kind of architectural interest. Shutters, balconies, window boxes, anything that will break that up so it won't be a monotonous line. And then I won't have to answer, why did I let that happen?"
Why did you?
I was asleep at the wheel. That's it.
Councilman Wilden.
Well, all you have to do is do exactly what everyone said here, and you're golden. No, it's a concept plan, so you guys have a tough job, but I appreciate you bringing a concept plan in this fashion, and obviously there needs to be some work. I'll go through my notes briefly because everyone's getting tired and they're not going to remember what I said anyway. Open space along the river, like you're doing that. I would ask that you work with one of the planners that reports to David, Carriage, she's on the Jordan River Commission. Do some coordination with there. They can help create some of that vision. Well, technically I'm on the Jordan River Commission, but she goes more frequently than I do. So it'd be good to coordinate with her, if you're all right with that, David. If you do ever use the baseball field in your calculation, the sports complex, just make sure that SLR agrees to give you that credit, and we'd need to have that in writing so that it doesn't end up going and double counted in other places. Zero lot line, that was one of the first things, I don't know if it was my first council meeting or second. Zero lot line, I wasn't that familiar with it, I'm just telling you, it's just not worth it. It's a big hot point with the community. They hear zero lot line and you'll get tons and tons of people, and then it takes something that's, it turns it very political, so I would just avoid it there. Do like a variety of product, and you know, if you can work on a variety of lot sizes in the different product. And this is the one unique comment I thought I had until Commissioner Steele said it, but so I'm disappointed. But just doing four-sided architecture on major roads, Redwood, etc., so that we don't run into that. And see, my notes are here. I didn't steal it from you, so she stole it from me. No, so that's just something to work on because it doesn't look great on Redwood Road. It kind of makes almost a, I don't know what you call it, like a tunnel feel, or yeah, you're driving to a prison. I don't know, something like that. it'll make it a little bit nicer. Of course, you need to put some clarity on the commercial and apartment area up on the north side. Like we talked about, not putting apartments right there. If you are going to push them further south, having some very specific clarity around that so we understand what we're being asked to consider for approval. I like the concept of increasing commercial along the Pony in lieu of the church right there. I think that is an optimal spot for you guys because eventually there will be a lot of traffic. Maybe not even eventually, even if there's a local road. There's a lot of choke points along Redwood Road, and so you'll get a lot of people running up there to just get out of the city, quite honestly, especially with the construction going on. So there would be some success, I think, in marketability there. I haven't done the market research, but that's just my feeling anyway. I already talked about that. Looking to increase visitor parking, and then a big thing is the agreement with SLR. It happened before I was on the city council. I was on the finance committee. So, I mean, this was a long time ago, but part of the density granted was we're going to create, or in concentration of homes, a walkable community, walkability, and looking at, and I know this is concept plan high level, and my screen just switched, but there was one of the products, there's like, Commissioner Brianna, sorry. What are they, the Carriage house is kind of in the middle. I mean, that's a large block. I mean, if you're going to do that type of thing, there needs to be visibility and pass and walkability because they'd get kind of trapped in there. I don't know what section, we just kind of in the middle where it's these 4 by 4 by 4 by 4.
Well, it's more central and it's in the Overlook.
Yeah, kind of in that area, just on the plans, including walkability and ease to get around there. From that standpoint, that's about all I have. There's been a lot of comments, and I think you guys have your work cut out for you, but I appreciate the effort you're putting into it, and I think just we'll work through it with you. So.
Okay, Commissioner Cunningham.
Finally.
It's Kirk's fault you're last.
Yeah, well, that's okay. No problem. I actually had one question that nobody's covered. I'm kind of shocked. The RC park across the way, it's the only existing neighbor currently there. I was wondering, I looked on there, tried to find a website for them. Apparently it's a county park, but, oh, it is? Oh, okay. So, but I couldn't find anything except for their Facebook page, and I watched a number of their videos and I kind of got lost what I was doing at that point. But I'm curious, is there any specific requirements for airspace that they have to have, or they have to fly on the property? How does that work?
That's actually one of the questions I had was with the AMA and the insurance they carry. Do we need to have a notice like we've done in other areas for the neighbors to make them aware there are airplanes with 6-foot wingspans, and if it crashes into your house, it may happen? Not saying I haven't lost a plane myself, but
that is an excellent question that we will certainly look into and have an answer for you.
Because I want to make sure that park doesn't leave Saratoga because it's unique to us now, and that is a big hobby.
Living in a golf community, I have to take responsibility for if a golf bar hits a window or whatever. That's part of the risk. The same thing with living by a plane park. You should have that same risk.
So Mark, basically I think Commissioner Cunningham's on the right track. From what I was going to bring up is just with their insurance and what are they doing, do we have the right spacing? I think we do from what I was able to find out, but do we need to notice those neighbors on their titles like we've done in other areas when they buy their house, they're aware?
You know, I think that's probably a really good point both for Pony Express as well as the RC park. I mean, I think in both of those areas, we should probably, warn people, hey, Pony Express is going to be a large, big road. And potentially have transit. So I think those are things that we could look into. Certainly, the delicate balancing act we have to have is let's say the RC club says, hey, we really would love to fly our jets, but we can't fly them over homes. Don't let them build the homes. There's a property right. that we have to take into account. And so we'll look into that, and we'll bring back some information on that particular issue, but I think it's a great point, and we'll happily look into it. We'll work with the applicant on that.
Glad I had something left. I'm going to echo the comments about Redwood Road and Pony Express, more commercial. I mean, we've talked about it on the Planning Commission a lot about escaping Eagle Mountain, and there's very few roads that come in and out, and this is going to be a great opportunity in the future for commercial, and I don't want to lose it with all housing. So if we can do something there so we have more. The other couple of things I was going to echo Commissioner Still's comments about the backs of the houses. And the one thing I wrote down was that I don't want us to become like West Valley. I want us to be unique. And anyway, I think that covers. The road layout was kind of bothering me. I was worried about residents being able to get in and out smoothly, and then also emergency vehicles getting in and out. I guess studies will be done with that later, but I did like Commissioner Barch's, or Councilmember Barch's comment about preserving views of the river with the roads. That may help with what I'm thinking about. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Wilkins.
I'd like to applaud everybody for their preparation and all the comments that have been made. Every comment or question that I have had has been checked off. And I also like to compliment you for sitting here. It's said that the mind can only absorb what the seat can support, and this has been a long meeting. I'll keep my comments short, kind of like ordering a steak. And in fact, while I'm sitting here, I look at this property and I think of it kind of like a steak. But I like a steak that's marbled. And let's just say that the fat is the open space. And let's say that the meat is the density of the housing. And it looks like you've salt and peppered this property nicely, where you've put in the churches, you've put in your townhomes, you spread out the schools. But it does look to me like this steak it has a big, nice fat line on the east side, and really the enjoyment is the flavor, and really that's the access to the open space. And if you have a lot of density that's really not that close to open space, for me, that flavor is not going to get there. It's going to be too dense. So some of that density, for me, has been explained by other commissioners and council members. That's pretty dense, and I don't think that this city has a lot of taste for high density. So other than that, all of my other comments, I mean, the only other thing that I wanted to mention was that you only have 36 spaces to enjoy that nice fat layer. So I would hope you get some more parking and better access to the river. Those are all my comments.
Okay. In an effort to pontificate longer than Councilman Porter, I'll quote to you some verses from... So, what was that? She was timing it. She said you were longer. Okay.
Told you.
Really, the preparation has been great. I actually really appreciate the Planning Commission joining us tonight to do this in this format. One, so as the two bodies from the city, we can be on the same page. Get information to you, get information back, and do that. I know we've had the chance to meet with you in the past. You've been great to listen to a lot of our concerns that we've had leading up to this. The meeting house that everybody talks about moving and twisting. I personally would like to see it kind of moved up closer to the cul-de-sac there on the Overlook, so that the access would be off of that road instead of off Pony Express Parkway, so we have one less access to deal with when this becomes a 5-lane road. To me, that just one more driveway on a busy road just doesn't make sense, when we could potentially have a light or something elsewhere on Pony that it would feed out to. Man, I got heavenly comments. Wow. Talk about the church, and there it goes. Notice on the plats also for the houses that are around the regional park sports complex, I'd like to make sure, Mark and David, that we get notices on those also that there will be lights potentially till midnight, because the whole intent of that sports park is to play ball. I don't want somebody buying a carriage house or a park house and coming to the city and going, I had no idea those bright big poles with lights would turn on at night. You know, now that hasn't happened in Lehigh or other cities. But we built this so that the youth could play, the young at heart could play, and we could play adult rec leagues into the evening like they do over in Vineyard area for the residents in this area. So I'd hate to see us lose that. With that oversight, the RC park, as Commissioner Cunningham mentioned, making sure that we preserve what we need to there where we can. When it comes to being around the substation, I actually thought Sandy would pick that up and work with them to get rid of the chain link and barbed wire look. Maybe clean that up as you develop around it. I think it's good for the houses that are going around it for you to work with Rocky Mountain Power to put a solid wall or something of that nature.
We will ask the question, but we're dealing with the
Rocky Mountain Power
union requirements for some of these things, so we'll look into it.
They just built the cast rock wall all the way around the one at Lehigh.
Really?
Oh, yeah, and it's much bigger.
Was that Lehigh or Rocky Mountain?
I don't know.
Lehigh, I think.
I don't know, but they've also done it, they've done it all over the place, so it's.
But if we could work with Oakwood and Rocky Mountain Power to kind of clean that up just as part of the corridor for your neighborhood there. And then I know that, there have been a couple comments with Facebook today about concerned about the growth of Saratoga Springs. We've seen it on the Facebook. And yeah, so there's comments about the growth, and I understand that concern. Saratoga's 20 years old. I moved out here almost 17 years ago. We had a two-way stop, a two-lane road with no shoulder on it, and it's growing. And I know after we move in, we always want to close the door behind us. But my concern as we grow this community, and I know you guys have talked about this, you're in it for the long haul. You're not in here just to build and get out. You're here to build a community with it, is just continuing to work with the city to make sure this growth happens. Sitting on the edge of the Silicon Slopes, sandwiched between a mountain and a lake, we are prime property. We're going to attract people moving here to the area to work on the Silicon Slopes. That's inevitable. It's a great city. We all moved here for a reason, and it's the beautiful amenities we have. And that's going to continue to attract great people. I've met a lot of great people that moved in here after I did. And so I look forward to meeting more great people. We need to be careful how we do that. I mean, just quick math, out of the 2,100 units proposed out of the 2,350 potential, that's just shy of 9,000 people in this development, or a fourth of our current population on this property alone. So I think as we go through and build this, both as a planning commission and as a city council, and with Oakwood and SLR and the staff, we need to be cognizant of that growth, that issue, to make sure we have things in place. Mark, I know we've talked about continuing to work with the north-south corridor with Foothill Boulevard, and SLR has been good to work with us too to preserve corridors so that we can make things like that happen, hopefully ahead of this curve. Start working with them to push that issue along, and just be careful as we go, because we've also got Mount Saratoga, we've got Wildflower, which had more cars but less units per acre than the state's proposed project of the prison at the north end. So I think we're posed for some good growth. I think we need to be in a position where we can manage the growth and not be managed by the growth coming into our city. As we do that, and just again ask the Planning Commission and the council and staff to look at those documents from the feedback we received through the surveys and stuff from the residents as we build Saratoga's future and the beauty that we've tried to maintain, and that we listen to that and we follow that so that people are represented fairly on that. That is the only comment I have. A lot of the other comments were great. I really appreciate the preparation of both bodies tonight for this meeting. Do you have any questions or comments back to the commission or council?
I think we appreciate all your time and comments, and, we need to take them back and evaluate, where we are at the plan, how we can make the right adjustments. That's the whole purpose of this meeting, was to get a sense of where you were with this. We do want to be a part of the community. We do like the master plan aspect.
Oh, can you turn your mic on?
It was.
Never been told I'm quiet. Interesting.
YouTube.
Oh, you should have told me we were filming. But we do appreciate the comments, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and on both bodies to bring this plan forward. So we got some work to do, and we understand some of the comments, and we'll have to evaluate those and fall into the next phases of our process.
Okay. Dane, SLR, do you have a comment? Is that what you were? Okay. Didn't know if you're trying to get attention or.
And where's the temple?
It had to be done. It had to be done.
Where your home is.
Okay. Barring that comment. Again, thank you everyone for your participation tonight. And thank you for listening to the residents. And if residents have questions or comments, please reach out to the Planning Commission or Council. Mark?
We do need a closed session with just the city council, if we could.
This was a great meeting.
Sorry to rain on your parade.
Okay. From the council, I will entertain a motion.
Yeah, I move that we go into closed session as outlined on the agenda.
I'll second.
I have a first from Councilman McComber, a second from Councilwoman Barch. All the council in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
You want to take a few-minute break?
I gotta go to the bathroom. Sorry, you didn't want to know that.